Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of That Annuity Show. Ramsey, good morning.
Yes, sir. Yeah, always good to be here.
Bitterly cold morning. Actually, I'm recording from Hartford, Connecticut this time, looking at the ice flows coming down the Connecticut River. I'm actually told that the Connecticut River could be longer than the Mississippi, the way it kind of curls, but I'm not sure I believe it. Who knew? So we've got a great guest, and we've actually, do you want to do the intros? And you two actually spent some good time together the last week.
Yeah. So this is the second convergence in as many weeks with Joe Jordan. Very excited about it. So we had the opportunity to both speak at an event last week in West Palm Beach, sponsored by Equitable. And their agent reinsurance entity. It's a pretty amazing group of producers that we got to meet and speak to. It was my first presentation to a group like that, and it was really as I said to Joe afterwards. It's always good to learn from the master. And Joe is, for the few of you that don't know who Joe Jordan is, he's been described variously as an industry expert, a motivational speaker. He's all of the above, and he is a critical voice in the retirement space, has been for many years, and also importantly, it's a voice that has a global reach, which is, I think, quite unusual in our space. I think we can tend to be a little bit domestically focused. So we're lucky to have him with us here today. Joe, tell us a little bit about your latest, and we'll go from there.
Well, that's great, and it's really great to be with you guys. And I think you put on a great show. I think you're a classic example of folks who just say, well, let's have an idea and do something, and it's growing because it fills a need, I think. And so I congratulate you on that. The thing that I've been toying with, for people to know, my background. I have a very diverse background. I was a life insurance agent. I ran insurance sales at Payne Weber. For you young people, it's like a small Merrill Lynch, okay? It was a wirehouse on Wall Street. They're looking at me. They have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, okay? And then I went to MetLife, and I built their annuity business, and then had all retail product development and started their fee-based financial planning unit. So what happened is I had a real observation that I thought that this was back then, that really what happened is I think that we financial services is not as client-centric as other industries, and I thought there would be problems with that. And that's when I bumped into the Gallup survey, which was 2012, okay, and it said that the only people below us from ethics and believability were car salesmen in Congress, and I figured that would be a problem. And you know what the number one profession was? It was nurses. This is 2012. So you can imagine it's off the Richter scale now. So my whole thrust in what I try to talk about, I'm proficient in the X's and O's and the numbers, okay? But my whole thrust is trying to raise and elevate the prestige of this business that we're in, to get people to begin to recognize that perhaps you give priests and rabbis a run for their money, okay? You probably do the most important, they can be the most important person in someone's life, and we just don't speak enough about it. And that also translates into some other stuff. But what I really think is lacking is in financial services. It's driven by product providers, which is fine, but they have something to sell, and it's all with numbers. And I don't think this business is a story of numbers. It's a number of stories. And so we have to bring out the human aspect of it. And it's becoming more so now because there's multiple places where people can go to access information. But whether they act on it. And so what's really lacking, I think, in financial services is the right brain emotional aspect of it. Nick Murray always tells us that the primary determinant in terms of whether or not people succeed is not fees, okay, it's not performance, it's their behavior. And behavior management is the aspect of what financial services is all about. So it's coming full circle. And so what that means is, some people say, I don't do annuities or I don't do Medicare or what have you. People want it all done. And you don't necessarily have to do it all. You have to have the expertise to do it. Because that's what people are looking for, is a plan, and they're looking for somebody, to handle it. So that was my thing, and I wrote a book, Living a Life of Significance, which extols the whole idea and concepts of the Herculean impact that we have on people's lives. And that also translates to the fact that it's a tough business and you have to prospect. And as I always said, you know, the business is built on two foundations, prospecting and everything else, you know. And that's not a joke, because the reason people show up to meetings is because, or they pay for people to go to meetings, is because they think they're in front of somebody. That's the biggest challenge they face. And so I believe that if you know you do something that's worthwhile and that it's helpful for others, it gives you the courage to face that rejection. And we lose a ton of people. We lose a ton of people all of the time because they can't handle it. And that's the bottom baseline as far as I'm concerned. So that's why I think it's important. So having said that, when you take a look at the tradition, so I started the fee-based planning at MetLife, and when I was looking at it, I said, man, this is all numbers and facts and everything. So that's where I brought Nick Murray in. And I said, this guy's the sage, so he's going to tell us this. He didn't say anything about charts, graphs, or anything. He was talking about behavior. I said, wow. You know, so that was a big door open. So, you know, where I'm at now is the idea of, for retirement planning, you know, it's always driven by numbers, is what I call the purpose-driven retirement plan. And so it's purpose-driven. And so this is something that's important. So trying to bring the human side out of it, which we don't talk a lot about. And so everyone feels deficient because they don't know all the facts and figures. If only I can master the numbers, I'll be great. Well, here's the bottom line, okay? It's dealing with the human experience. And no robo-advisor can do this, right? Those that retire to something are happier than people who retire from something. And there's all this misnomer about what retirement is. And one of the things that I think we have to do is to prepare retirements for substantial life changes, not just deal with the numbers and how much dough do you have and what have you. There's a great quote. It's from one of the astronauts, Eugene Cernan. And he said, if you think going to the moon is hard, try staying home. So think about that, okay? So there's a major transition in someone's life. The people sitting down talking to them is only talking about the dollars and cents. And the fact of the matter is they're going to face a lot of emotional issues. And that's a differentiator that no robo-advisor can do, right? So you got to ask two questions, right? One is, how are you going to spend your time? Usually that's considered irrelevant. Well, I wish we'd get down to the facts. How are you going to spend your time? What are you going to do? And then how are you going to pay for it? And you can't answer the second question until you answer the first one. So that, I think, is a fundamental change, the shift towards the idea of the financial advisor becoming a life coach. I spoke at the advisor group, big meeting, you know, and the CEO got out and said, I was very proud of you guys because you operated during this pandemic more like life coaches than you did financial folks. And so that, I think, is the future. That's where I think it's going. So there's some sample questions we should be asking people, you know. Hey, what are your observations of other people who've retired? Have you noticed it? You know, is Fred bored stiff? That he popped the champagne cork and now he's on the golf course and he's bored out of his mind, or what have you? You got to start getting them to talk to other people to get what their experiences were with retirement. Okay. What lifestyle or recognition benefits did you derive from working? You know, people, I'm a doctor, or he's the senior vice president, or what have you. What happens when you go from who's who to who is that guy? You know, all of a sudden there isn't, right? You know, people aren't genuflecting and putting flowers in your pathway. And, oh, it's you. You know, you're just another guy. Well, you got to get prepared for that. Okay. Some folks think that retirement will be one pleasurable experience. Well, what are your thoughts about that? Have you ever thought that it might not be? You know, there's a great joke. I forgot the magazine it was in. And they're two guys. They're in a courtyard and they're smoking cigarettes and they need a shave. And then you notice that they have wings and there's a bent halo and there's a big sign over this entranceway and it says heaven, but the bottom of the H is knocked out. And the guy says, you know, somehow I thought it'd be better than this. You know, so that, you know, I think those are some of the human sides that needs to be brought in, because I'm going to tie it back to what we actually do. And so what do you think? There's a balance between a vocation and vacation. So those are things that are there. And I hear something that's important too. Okay, pleasure cannot be sustained. Listen, pleasure cannot be sustained beyond the activity supporting it. But happiness or transcendence can be sustained beyond the activity supporting it. And fulfillment is a direct result of purpose, which is the contribution that's greater than what's in it for you. So guess what? This whole thing I've been telling financial services people about living a significant life is relevant to everybody. So what are you going to do when you get into this next thing? I mean, a lot of people I meet in retirement, they're busier than when they were before they retired. So those are things that have to be part of our milieu, that comes out. And I think that's important. So there's a couple of books out there that I would recommend to people. One of them is Mitch Anthony, and it's Life-Centered Planning. And that's where he talks about the fact that people are not just interested in ROI, return on investment. They're interested in ROL, return on life. What are you going to do with your life? How are you going to deal with that? Only a human being can do that, and it really makes you different. The other one is Rick Warren's book, A Purpose-Driven Life. Okay, and he says humans were made to have meaning, and a meaningless life is without hope and significance. So you got to start preparing for people to the idea. And some people say, I don't know if I want to do that. But you differentiate yourself. They start calling you up and saying, should I get Hellman's ketchup or, you know what I mean? They start asking you other stuff and you become part of their life. That, I think, is the future, all right? And then John Maxwell, and I really recommend this book. It's called Intentional Living. And he said, to add value to others, I must first value myself. And the only way to be consistent and authentic in valuing others is to see value in ourselves. We don't see others the way they are. We see others the way we are. So you have to start focusing on what you do. And Speaker Brian Tracy said it this way. He said, there's a direct relationship between your own self-esteem and the health of your own personality. So that, I think, the products and everything we sell, and I'd be glad to talk about it, help to facilitate that. And so that's where I think the fundamental difference is altering this thing to be more like a life coach than just sitting down with someone and making that happen. Now, obviously, the nuts and bolts are important in terms of doing that, but I think that's a differentiator that's there. Look, when you take a look at the traditional financial planning model, it's unsustainable, okay? You don't control what the market does, so what do? You meet once a quarter or twice a year to tell them what the market did. You have no control over that. And so what happens? People begin to say, well, why? The markets went through the roof. What did you do? You're a bump on a log, and, what do I need you for? Or it goes down. You idiot. Why didn't you take me out? It's that type of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's built into financial planning procedures, which are more left-brain oriented and mathematical, that are unsustainable over time. Because someone could go and, I can go buy the stuff. Of course, they neglect the fact that, the reason you need an advisor is when the market goes down. Because, a timely intervention can be worth a decade's worth of fees. And all its obsession is about fees and all of that other stuff. But to some extent, I think some of the models that we have now are unsustainable. Because if you can't alter the thing, it's there. If you can't differentiate yourself, it's there. If other people are in the same categories, there. And what happens is if it starts taxing your ability to live your life, I'm talking financial planner, and it pays you less, it's unsustainable. So it's got to take a different path. And so that's what I think, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. Well,
so go ahead, Paul.
Well, Joe, you know me. I'm the practical. I want to take the stuff out of the box, put the wires together. I can probably figure out and do a projection of your liquidity for the next 5 years, and maybe a conversation and an hour at my desk. Find purpose. I mean, is this another form that is this another needs analysis form? How do you start that conversation? Is it about changing my practice, or is it changing my conversation with Ramsey over an extended period of time?
I think it's changing the conversation. I think it's starting out to find out what people want, what they want to do, and what are your goals? Most people don't know that. What is it you want to do, or what do you envision in retirement? So I asked some challenging questions there, didn't I? Right? Have you spoken to anyone else who's been retired? What's been their experience? Oh, they're cloud nine. I think it's the greatest thing ever. Oh, that's good. So what do you do for it? Do you get any psychic rewards out of what your profession is? Recognizing that if you retire, you may not get those anymore. So I think it's a change of some of the discussions. You still have to go through the facts, but if you're going through the facts and you're just doing the money's irrelevant to what the people want to do. And then I would say, for the most part, what I've been hearing is most people are afraid to spend what they've got. And that's because they're afraid that, it just might go away. So you have to give people permission to live. But I do think it's crucial and important that we begin to become kind of a life coach to find out what is it, and to open them up to the idea. So that's what some of these books help to do. The books that I just described are helpful from an advisor point of view, and then I think you could ultimately send them out to other people. Because some guy says, all I'm going to do is smoke cigars and play golf, Well, that gets old, man, really does. So I think that's part and parcel. I think those books and hopefully my comments can help that.
So, there are so many things that you commented on there. So I'll start with the issue of identity, which I thought was pretty interesting. It's like, right, and you said it, at the end of the day, like the job you have, no matter how successful you are, in part it's to make money, but also like what you do and is a very sort of expression of yourself. And then when you retire, like it's gone. And how do you fill that gap? That was first thing that really stood out. Another one was this idea of being a life coach. And maybe this is a bit of a controversial question, but is the industry ready? Because it means that people that are in the industry have to kind of change their stripes a bit. Huh. And so that's the first question is, how hard do you think that's going to be? And the second question is, should we be recruiting different personalities going forward in this industry?
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, there are some realities to the business, in terms of the economics of it and how it all works. But I do think, So bear in mind that my book, Living a Life of Significance, was directed towards advisors. And
sure.
Guess what? It's relevant to clients. This doesn't sound like a big leap. It's a big leap for me. Everybody needs relevance, and everyone needs to have that. So yes, I do think there has to be a rethink. There has to be a checkup from the neck up in terms of what we actually do, and it's more important now, because before, if you were an advisor, you were the only source. Well, there's tons of sources that are out there, and a lot of the stuff that an advisor does today, a machine can do, right? A machine can tell them a quarterly report, and go back and forth. And by the way, the machine, if someone says, I got to get out of this thing, they'll do it, okay? They're not going to come back and counsel them and make it happen, I mean, look at 07 to 09, right? People went down 57%. They just couldn't do it. Boom, they're out, So it's really the human side that I think is there, and I just don't think we do enough of it. So I think the exploration of what people are going to do and whether or not they've started to prepare themselves for retirement is something that I think we need to do, and that couples on towards all of the products and the stuff that we provide. But that's first.
Yeah, my wife, yeah, Linda, Joe,
yeah, sure.
You met her. She's a bookophile, and so we spend a lot of time in bookstores, but I find it fascinating just to walk through these bookstores and see what books are face up, how much space and shelving is dedicated to certain topics, because you really kind of hear it's kind of like what people are thinking, right? It's Google before Google, and it's interesting. There's the retirement section. If you go to the retirement planning section at Barnes & Noble, it's maybe 12 inches max of shelving. Business, for all these business gurus, and Ramsey, I tell people I think sometimes those business books are probably should be in the fiction category, a lot of the time. Right. Joe, right? the nonfiction. But the whole, self-help, self-improvement section, Joe, it's enormous, Right. 6-8 shelves. But how do you improve yourself unless you're connecting yourself with your finances? So I think, You're bridging that gap, right? I mean, that's really what you're saying, is how do you connect your purpose? But there's a void today.
Well, there's a lot of value attached to that. And you recall I always said value is only an issue in the absence price is only an issue in the absence of value, right? So you have to understand that shorthanded, what happens is a lot of critics of different products all come out and they just stroke the fee issue. Well, especially with a lot of the products that we talk about, the annuities and stuff like that, it helps to take away some of the risk. And some people just can't tolerate that stuff. And so it was like the last time I was on, I talked about the Dalbar study. You know, a lot of critics have been banging on the variable annuities because the fees are so high. Well, they found out that people who invest in series accounts, separate accounts, and variable annuities did better than the regular funds. Why? Because they bought into this idea of a future stream of income. They know there's an underpinning guarantee, and they hang out. So even with the higher fees, they wind up even outperforming. It totally strips that thing. It's really about behavior. And I want to take it to the next level, not just at the product level, but also from a standpoint in terms of how we talk to people. And I think those books can help that, because that's a way that you can become a value added to clients, that they aren't looking to get rid of you. And if you get someone hawking you because your fee's higher and they want to cheap it, you just let them go. But I do think that's the differentiator, because here's the risk associated with it. 25 years ago, you were it. Now you're not. People have other options to sit down and do it, and they probably will do harm to themselves if they happen to just do it on their own.
Yeah, so thinking about the Super Bowl and where people's heads are, you know, I watch those ads, and, you know, you talk about, Joe, you know, what's happening tomorrow versus what's happening 10 years from now. Right. And you saw a little bit of all of it, right? Like ads for the game apps, right? You know, I won't mention their names, but, you know, there are at least 2 or 3 of these game apps promoted in markets. Cryptocurrency, how many ads were there for cryptocurrency?
Right.
You know, to me, this feels like there's just the FOMO factor of, if I don't buy this, what's going to happen tomorrow? Yeah. And then ads for electric cars. But, you know, I drive one, but these, Ramsey, these were ads for cars coming in, and I couldn't believe it. We're going to have 10 cars in 2030. Yeah. 2030. Mm-hmm. Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. I can't go shopping. So, Joe, where are people's heads, Joe? I mean, is this state of the young people, or is this state of the mind of everybody who you're thinking about tomorrow, but you can't even? Yet it feels like there's so much change, but it's. I don't want to make. Do I even care about what's happening 10 years from now?
Well, I think you have to go towards that, you know, because it's the idea of living for the day. You know what I mean? You know, living
right.
in the moment, and you can wake up dead, you know, doing that, you know. And then sometimes, I guess the dichotomy you were pulling out was then someone's talking about cryptocurrencies, and my advice to people is, if you don't really understand it, then don't get involved in the middle of it, you know. So I'm not going to get into that debate, but I have no, you know, it might be the best idea I'm going to miss now. So, because I don't know enough about it, and so I think that's what sometimes happens, and they're chiding you to say that, you know, think of all of the things that you missed. Well, you know, I'm going to miss this one, but and so I'm not down on it. But it's just very confusing. That's why people need someone they can sit down and trust, and it's incumbent then upon the advisor to make certain that they're up to speed as much as possible with everything else. Because
it feels like the challenge, Ramsey, is how do you know, in an environment like this today, where there's the immediacy of, I've never felt like I'm living through a period where it's all about today, not tomorrow. How do you slow, you know, how would you slow a conversation down with a client, right, to get them to think about purpose, think about, 10 years is not that far away, Joe. In some ways it is, in some ways it's not, right? You know, what's the approach?
Well, I think, you know, since this is the Annuity show and we're talking about retirement planning, it's usually talking to people in their 50s and it's upon them, you know, so that's at least helpful. And it's all a distraction. So I just think altering the conversation from not so much how much money you have to what is it you're going to do is an interesting thing. And I'm not naive enough to think that everyone would latch on to that, but I think that's the future. I think the people who are really going to succeed in this business, gain clientele, and not have them drop out, and listen to their advice, are people who are going to operate that way. People who just operate strictly on performance, saying I'll outperform everyone, you know, you got to run away from those folks, because it's impossible. No one can do that. Okay. and so that I think it's just like Mitch Anthony says, it's return on life. What are you going to do with your life, and how is that going to operate? So this isn't going to happen tomorrow, but I'm just throwing the seed out, right? It's just in there for people to begin to think about it. And when you alter fundamentals, it happens like that. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a light switch that someone would flick. It's not saying someone, you learned it all wrong. It's just the idea of starting to experiment with that, because that's the thing that people really want. And they want to have a plan, and they need a partner in the plan, and that would be you, financial advisor, and a lot of the products we have. And don't get biased. First of all, just because separate accounts and VAs outperform, that doesn't mean that's the thing you should do. I'm just saying a lot of products have a lot of appeal to different types of people that you have to understand what their mentality is. I'm adverse to people who come out and be critical of stuff significantly just on the idea of where they perceive performance or fees. Because somehow, if you didn't have those fees, you would do that much more. And there's, as I said, price is only an issue in the absence of value. I think people in this business are very proud of what they do.
So you've spent many years sharing this message, and it feels like the message around sort of the non-financial issues is stronger today from you than it was previously. How are people responding? So how are for the most part, you're talking predominantly to like advisors, planners. Are there situations where your audience is consumers? So one curious, like, what is the mix of audiences you have in the first order? And the second thing is, like, do you think people are kind of getting it? Is it sinking in yet? First of all, I think Paul and I both agree with you completely in the direction you're going. Right. The question is, like, are people in a frame of mind to make that shift yet?
Well, one thing I would tell you is that my whole thing of life of significance was really focused on advisors. This whole idea about it also translates into clients is new. Okay, it sounds subtle, but it's not. It's big. Okay, I call it. Sometimes you're faced with the titanium membrane. It's so close, but you don't see it. So I didn't see it until kind of recently, and when I started the fee-based planning at MetLife. So I didn't see it that way, and mostly because I didn't know a heck of a lot about it. So I was trying to catch up and learn the stuff. Because if I figured if I learned the stuff, then I would know it. Well, I think a lot of people in this business, they start off dumb, and then they get real smart, and then they get dumb again, and so that's the dumb again side, is get back to the fundamentals and the basics. And I think that's the way that you differentiate yourself. So I would tell you that this whole idea about the purpose-driven retirement is relatively new to me. I have been doing client seminars, and they really like it, because that's their conversation. A lot of the stuff we talk about is in a vernacular that they have no idea what the hell you're talking about. And sometimes you throw terms around and what have you, it's not there. But, have you given any consideration? Have you spoken to anyone? Is anyone in your family retired, and how are they? Well, they just love it, or Fred's bored out of his mind. He's trying to get on board to do stuff. He's looking for things to do. It's that type of stuff, So I think that's first, and then it will grow from there. So it's a little uncomfortable, I think, for people to move that way. But, that's the way fundamentals change, is that it just starts. It's the awareness of it. So maybe a lot of reps are way ahead of me, but this was a light bulb to me, is the idea of a purpose-driven retirement, that you still need purpose in retirement. You still need that. I mean, I was trying to refer to a movie, and I forgot the name of it, so I'm not going to do it. But anyway, well, I forgot the name of the movie. It's Ernest Borgnine. It's the one he won the Academy Award for, And so there's a scene there where Ernest Borgnine's mother's talking to a neighbor, and the woman is saying, "I'm 55 years old and my life is over," because all of her life was around child rearing. So now it's done. And you know what? I'm done. She's 55 years old, but there's no longer babies around, so we're hoping. So imagine that, and that was back then. This was done in the 50s, that movie. So, that had a profound effect. So I think that's I think that's part of it. I think it's just a message that needs to get out. It's something I'm doing, and hopefully people can absorb it. Don't try to change everything overnight.
So you said something very interesting, like, that cycle of, like, you put it as being dumb again. And I think it's really, at the end of the day, like, we all have to sort of focus on continuous learning, no matter what our vintage is, right? No matter how far along we are in our career, how much we think we've sort of become masters of our craft, like, the world changes, people change, and we have to remain adaptable. So kudos to you for making that critical adjustment.
Yeah, and Joe, on the point of thinking about purpose, getting a little deeper into the psyche of people. I think people are ready. Ramsey, you asked about consumers, but I just look, Joe, at our society. Like when you and I are working together. Fast forward now, much more acceptance of the general community to talk about mental health, awareness, right? Yeah. Ted Lasso, right? Second season. For those of you who watch it, a great sort of, story thread around the sports psychologist coming in and doing minor adjustments to get a team to cohesively play billions, right? We see a psychologist on the sidelines doing this. Even Navy SEALs, I know... I've talked to consulting firms working with the government, and what's one of the biggest issues to keep SEALs active, Joe, is to have somebody for them to talk to, and there's a lot of work sort of taking that stigma away. Maybe if I'm opening up my agency with Ramsey here next year, we should hire a retirement psychologist. Joe, what do you think?
Wouldn't be a bad idea.
Bring this. Who was it in the Peanuts character, Lucy and her nickel a session, right?
Yeah. I'll take it one step further. So Joe, you told us, I don't remember if it was in the early part of the show or in the prep, but you talked about how nurses are at the top of the trust spectrum.
Right, yeah.
And presumably that's because they have high EQ personalities.
Right.
So Paul, first thing we do is you hire a psychologist. Second thing is we find ex-nurses that want to be financial advisors.
Joe, right? there's the source. There's the new recruiting source.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, hey, this was terrific, Joe. Thanks for coming back, and world's opening up. Let's hope this virus is the last wave we see.
Yeah.
Ramsey, what do you your thoughts?
So, just a couple things. So one was certainly the discussion around, I think, the behavioral and qualitative elements of retirement planning being purpose-driven. I think that is the wave of the future. I think certainly like on our show in 2022, I think we want to have more discussions like that. Second piece, Joe, is just, how you're spreading the word. Like, so between you have a new message. We have, we're in the throes of a pandemic, and there's different ways you can communicate. I guess, tell us a little bit about how you're going to continue to spread this message broadly, and again, not just in the U.S. but elsewhere. So remote, live, how you plan to approach that?
Well, you're
be as ubiquitous as you've always been.
You're part of it, and then this cycle of I never did a webinar in my life until this thing hit, and actually it was easier. We're taping this now, so it's February, of 2022, and I got to tell you that from November to now has been hard because people didn't know what they were going to do. A lot of people had to stop their programs and what have you. But anyway, so you're part of getting this word out, and I also, one of the good things about what I do, I might be going to the UAW soon. I'm going to start doing more stuff internationally, and a lot of what I talk about is relevant to them. So I'm not doing a deep dive into the U.S. Social Security Administration, when I'm there, or the laws of reverse mortgages as they are in the United States. It's really, conceptual stuff to get across the human side of it, and of what we do. And, I'm not poo-pooing, knowing the technical stuff. I mean, a lot of the Nick Murray books are really crucial in terms of people finding out, what to do. Of course, Tom Hegner's stuff is great, and the books that I just went through. But I do think there has to be kind of this shift towards recognizing, if you're in financial services, you have a remarkable responsibility, you can have a significant impact on others, which is a way of living a significant life. And you should start exporting that to your clients to make certain that they understand beyond just the X's and O's and the numbers and all that stuff. Because remember, it's not a story of numbers, it's the number of stories. The humanization of what we actually do and the potential for what could happen, how you would change, your circumstances. And so it's I'm looking for a word here. It's managing. No, it's not managing expectation. It's I can't recall what it is. So I'll stop.
Well, look,
what I was going to do.
Be sure to send us a picture from when you're in the UAE.
Yes.
Send us a picture from the top of the Burj Dubai. Are you going to Abu Dhabi or Qatar?
I think it's Abu Dhabi, and then I'm also putting in to do some stuff with MDRT.
Nice.
That's the beauty of that, and MDRT is the fact you're in a completely different culture, but it's all the same. You know what I mean? It's the human condition is that you want to protect. You want to protect your loved ones, and then you want to make certain you don't run out of money. The biggest issue the planet faces, I think, is not all of the ones that are up there now. It's the aging population of the world, I mean, that's something that is really, we've never experienced that before. So, and as Nick Murray says, it's yo-yo, which means you're on your own. And that's the responsibility of people who are in this business to make certain that they can help people do it when they're on their own.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, this was great. So we have a lot of people on our show who have agencies, distribution channels. So what's the best way to get in touch with you if they want to have you at one of your events?
My email is joe@josephjordan.com. Joe, J-O-E, @josephjordan.com. My josephjordan.com is my website.
Yeah, your
website.
Yeah.
I'm pretty easy to find. You put Joe Jordan, and it usually pops up first. But I am anxious to get this out. So thanks for that question. And I really like the intimacy instead of being in with hundreds of people. Is if you have an agency or a smaller group, where we could sit down and talk about it. Because that's something that's there, and especially for the younger people who grew up with all of this technology stuff, it's like bringing them back, and also they are feeling that they want to do something that's worthwhile. Think about this. This virus really got people thinking about living a significant life. Did it not? Right? What the hell am I doing? So a lot of people are changing jobs and what have you. So this is a good profession to get into. So my thing is I would like to get into smaller, intimate groups and discuss this stuff. And because at the end of the day, I saw this research in North Carolina. People remember 6% of what you said, and they remember 100% of how you made them feel. So that's the future as far as I'm concerned. The people who exercise that and grow in that are the people who are going to be very successful, but also live a significant life, recognizing part of their motivation is what they're doing for others.
Okay, that's
Fantastic.
great. That is awesome. Joe, thanks for coming. Ramsey, great to have you on, and we will be back again next week for another episode of That Annuity Show. Thanks.
And
thanks, Joe.
I'm
Thank
like
you,
the
Joe.
Ginsu knife. There's more.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe.
All right.
Bye.